I'm Gabe, and we're going to go over Genesis chapter 8 and 9 today. We've already had some fantastic lessons from Kyle, and sadly my name isn't Kyle as well, or we'd complete that trio, but sadly I'm just Gabe. But we have some great lessons today, and I'm hoping to give one last good lesson for the teen class. So I've put out three topics, three ideas and thoughts that I've come across when I read through these two chapters, and I thought there was something interesting that we could look at today. And they're all relating to each other, but they're about the character of God, just the idea of how He works, and seeing Him in action, remembering us and His day, not in His day-to-day life, but in His creation and working with us. And then Him trusting us and us trusting Him. They're interesting concepts, and they'll make a little bit more sense as we get into the topics of things. But first, this is about the flood. And I have a pretty unique flood story because in 2010, I live in Tennessee, as you guys do too. I'm sure some of you might remember the 2010 floods. In 2010, there was a massive flood and rain system that moved through. We had so much water. I know the Tennessee River in Nashville was flooding into Nashville. It was very bad for a lot of people. And I'm not going to say I enjoyed it, but I did have fun with the water because I have a big drainage, just a massive, just little ditch behind my house where all the water in my neighborhood goes. And it filled up completely. It didn't get into my house, luckily. I was blessed in not having any water damage, but it filled up so much. And I know me and some of my friends got together and we had a kayak back there. And now, we were out there for just a little bit. Well, we weren't out there for too long. But it's interesting to think that in that short time, it didn't flood for that long. It wasn't that long that the water was there. Give it about a week and it was gone. But for Noah was there for a lot longer. The flood lasted so much more than just a little bit of time. That's crazy to think to me that there was that massive of a flood. And that's the biggest one I've ever seen, and probably the biggest I'll ever see, if I'm lucky. But I just think that's amazing to think about. Now let's look into something. I want to look at God in action. Now, in Genesis chapter 8 and 9, we see God's hand working so much throughout all the verses. The waters were being restrained in verse 2 of chapter 8. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heaven were stopped. And the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, into verse 3. What's interesting there is, I think the wording of restrained is unique. Because it didn't just stop naturally. I know sometimes we can think of Mother Nature working a little too much. We picture science working as well, and I'm not saying science is wrong. I love science. I'm a nursing major. I think science is amazing, and I enjoy greatly going and looking at different classes and things like that. But we got to remember, God's in control. God's in action of this situation on earth. He stopped the rains from happening. He restrained them so that they were not as strong and continuous as they were in that time. And that's something really unique to think about. I think we often forget that. Now, if we're looking down into chapter 9, verses 13 and 14, it says, I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. When I do set my bow in the cloud, when I bring a cloud over the earth, do we remember God in our lives, in these situations? Do we see Him in action, working throughout these things? He's setting a cloud into place. He's setting the rainbow down there. He sends rain. Do we remember that? Now, let's look at Luke chapter 8 for a second too. So we're still in Genesis. We're still looking at this. But Luke chapter 8 does something rather interesting. I'm sure many of you probably have heard this story at least once or twice in your life. But Luke chapter 8 is when Jesus calms a storm. Now, God restrained the rains for the flood. And in this, Jesus calms a storm. And now reading in verse 22 of chapter 8, now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship and with his disciples. And he said to them, let us go over unto the other side of the lake. And they launched forth. And as they sailed, he fell asleep. And there came down a storm of wind on the lake. They were filled with water and were in jeopardy. And they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water. And they ceased, and there was a calm. Jesus is in control, not only of our lives, not only of daily situations, but of everything. Do we think of the magnitude of that? Of Him being in control of the earth? I know I really get lost in that mindset, like I said a moment ago, of the Mother Earth, of nature, of science working continuously. But Jesus is in control of that. He set it up. He created the world and how it works, and how it continues on its own. But He's working there. Now, sometimes we picture Jesus and we put him in that box of he's in the Bible. We read through the pages of the Bible and we only see Jesus here. Then we go about our lives and we remember him, we say prayers, we go to church, but do you see him in everyday life? When you wake up and watch a sunset, do you think of Jesus and God and the things he's doing to the earth? Even when you're not paying attention, when you're not looking, are you picturing everything that happens? Because I know I certainly failed at that one so many times. If we look at Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 18, it says, "Who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature? For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. For he is before all things, by him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things might have the preeminence." It's unique to think that God not only is the head of our church, not only is he the high priest, but he's also the creator of the universe. And sometimes we forget about that. We just leave that in Genesis 1 as the story as we all think it is, that we learn as little kids. But do we remember he's in control? Now, speaking of remembering too, let's go back and look once again at Genesis chapter 8. What's the first verse there? I think that's rather interesting to look at for a second. And God remembered Noah. Now, did God forget that he was there? Because God knows all. Did he just completely forget about it and go, oh yeah, you guys are down there in the ark? No. In this sense, remembered is more of a focus. Focusing on Noah. Turning his attention to Noah once again. Now, I like that. It's interesting to me because let's reverse that and look at it from our perspective. Do we remember God? Because God always knew Noah was there. I'm not going to doubt that for even a moment. He just turned his focus back to God. Do we always remember God is there, though? That's something I know I struggle with sometimes. I don't think about God as much as I should. He should be on my mind continually. But he's not. Now, I know we have some problems. School gets heavy, or our lives get a little hard sometimes. We have trials, tribulations, a loved one might pass, you might be having some drama with your friends, you might be in the middle of a relationship or a breakup, and things get in the way. They always do. But do we see God in all those things, like we just said, watching God in action? Do we remember him? Do we turn our focus to him? Now, throughout the Bible we see people who turn in their moment of need to God. In moments of crisis we look so much at God. I know 9/11, churches were filled for weeks out and after that, as the nation was united because of this evil that we saw, of this great tragedy that happened. And in times of hardship, in times of pain and agony, we turn to God. Some more than others, but we all look to him. Do you remember him in the good times too, though? Because remembering God isn't only about one time, isn't only about hard times. It's about the good times. It's about the times that no one remembers. When you get up in the morning and you're brushing your teeth, after you've maybe said a prayer, after you've maybe woken up and just yawned and struggled to get out of bed for a moment, are you remembering God as you're brushing your teeth? Are you remembering God as you're driving to school? Do you remember God in everything that you do? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be momentous. Are you remembering him? Because he's remembering you. He's actively looking out for you, looking for the perfectness inside of you. Are you doing the same? Now, we're never going to be able to get on Jesus' level. We will never be as good of a Christian as he was. Because he is the example. He is the high priest, the perfect sacrifice. But we can try. Now, if we look, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane falls to his knees and prays, and he asks his disciples to sit with him. This is in Matthew 26, if you want to go back and read it. Now, Jesus is praying. Jesus is God. Why is he praying? He's talking with his Father. He's talking with the Lord as he's about to go through something so painful and agonizing. He's sweating blood. He's kneeling in the garden, asking God to take the cup from him, take this great deed he's about to do for all of mankind. Let it pass to someone else. Because Jesus is scared. He was human, but he's also God. He understood what he had to do, but he was also scared in that moment. Now, Jesus remembered God. And like I said, we're never going to be on his level. We will never, unfortunately, be as perfect as he was. We can try. I think that's important to remember. So, we've got God in action. We're remembering God in action. We're remembering Him in our lives and in the moments we need Him and when it doesn't seem like we do. Now, are we trusting Him though? Now, we're seeing God in action. That's amazing. We're seeing what He's doing in our lives, to other people's lives, and just nature itself. We're remembering Him. Now, do you trust Him? Now, maybe for distance, it doesn't seem like those really work together. Now, let's look. Noah for a second. Noah was in the ark. Was it for a short time? 40 days, 40 nights? Was it longer than that, maybe? Now, let's look at something for a moment. Now, on verse 24 of Genesis chapter 7, it says, "And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days." Now, we just went through quarantine. And I was in my house for about 2 months. I left every now and then, but I was in there for quite a while. About maybe a couple weeks, I didn't leave at all. I did not like being in my house for 2 weeks, being stuck in one place for any small length of time. I don't enjoy that. Noah was in this, according to looking at all the different calendars and the different verses where it's talking about the months he was in there, the days he was in there, for about a year. 370 days, about 300 to 370 days. That's about the time we're setting it up as being there. That's a long time. And in that whole time, Noah didn't doubt. He didn't falter in his trust of God. He stayed in the ark with the animals and with his family. I think that's unique to think about. Because, like I said, I'm sure we wouldn't want to be in one boat for over a year. No leaving, no getting out on dry ground. Just stuck in that boat for a year. That's insane to me. Now, if we look down in verse 13, "It came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 7th and 12th day of the month, was the earth dry. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife and thy sons wives with thee." What's interesting about that? Noah saw the ground was dry, but he didn't get out. He waited for God to tell him to leave the ark. That's interesting to me. He trusted God. He waited for His judgment in what He says. I think that's unique to me. Do we trust in what God says? We have this whole Bible set in front of us with so many rules, so many applications for our lives. And sometimes we get caught up, like I just said, rules. They're means to live by. We trust God because God is all-knowing. God knows all. So we trust Him because He's smart. Because He knows what He's talking about. He wouldn't lead us astray. We trust in Him. Because, like we just said, He knows all. He has everything written down for us to get us to heaven. Why would we not trust Him? Because Noah obviously did. Because I'm not sure if one of my good friends looked at me and said, "Hey, get in this boat and stay there for a whole year, and it's going to rain a lot, you're not going to be able to get out, and you're going to maybe get out about a year, and then you can get out when I say so." I'm not going to listen to them. I don't trust them at all. I don't care how good of a friend they are. I'm not going to listen to someone when they say get in a boat for a year. That's insane. But Noah did with God. Do we trust Him that much? Because I don't think I do all the time, and I'm certain maybe you don't either. Because I'm not perfect. No one is. Are we trusting Him? Now, it's interesting to me that Noah was saved by water. And that's a weird way of saying that, isn't it? Because the earth was taken away. The flood covered everything. All living flesh was wiped out. But Noah was saved by water. It's interesting to me. Now, I'm not going to go too much into this, but I think it's interesting to see that and the idea. If you can look at 1 Peter and find so much more about that. And I encourage you, I challenge you to go out and read that. Look for that application. Try to see where you can see that fit together, because I think that's a fun Bible study to look at for yourself. And I don't know if I have the time to go into that today. But I encourage you to, because it's great. I know I struggle with Bible study, and I always find it easier when someone says, "Hey, look at this," rather than me opening the Bible and finding exactly where I want to look. So that's for you. If you want to go do that, great. There's a great chance. Take some time and just go look at it for yourself. But in recap of everything that we've talked about, this passage teaches us so much about the character of God. He is in our lives. He's taking an active role in our lives and in nature. So, are we remembering that? Are we seeing him in our lives? Are we focusing on him when we see he's acting, when we see he's working in our lives? And are we trusting him with our lives? I know I don't always look at that well. I don't really focus that well on what's going on. But trusting him and his knowledge, I think that's a beautiful thing that we really need to work on. Now, I hope you've learned a little bit more about the flood today. I hope you've gathered something. I know my lesson jumped around a little bit, but these are just some unique ideas I pulled from this text, and I think it's interesting to look at. Now, I hope that this has been good for you. I hope you've had a chance to learn today. There's some other lessons. I hope you have a great day. I was happy to be here with you. Goodbye.